The house eats children. That's what 9-year-old Keisha said, over and over, to anyone who would listen. No one listened. The sun was dipping behind the rusty rooftops of East Baltimore as Keisha stood clutching the wrought iron fence in front of the old brownstone. Her small frame barely reached the height of the lowest rail, but she leaned forward, voice barely above a whisper, eyes dark and steady. "They think no one's watching," she said to a man in a sharp suit stepping out of a shiny black SUV. The man's breath caught in his throat for a split second. A child speaking like that wasn't part of his carefully planned day. "Don't come inside," she warned. "They don't want you here. This house eats children." The man glanced at her, clearly amused. His name was Richard Caldwell, a real estate agent with a crisp white shirt and a smile practiced enough to sell a mansion on the moon. He pulled out his phone, clicked a video, and laughed. "This little girl's crazy," he said loud enough for the circle of onlookers to hear. "I'm going to post this on TikTok. Little creepy prophet of Baltimore." The circle chuckled. Someone nudged Keisha as she refused to look away from the house. Her voice remained soft but urgent. "They think their cameras hide the truth. They think no one will notice. But I see." Inside the polished conference room, Richardson was already live streaming the moment. "This is Keisha," he said with a sneer, pointing the camera at the girl. "The neighborhood's little haunted house mascot. Cute, right? Just some kid scared of the up-and-coming district." He posted the clip under the hashtag #CreepyProphet, and within minutes, it racked up thousands of views. "People love a spooky story," he mused aloud, sliding his phone into his pocket, "especially when it involves a kid." 2 weeks later, the Peterson family moved into the brownstone. Tanya Peterson, a single mother of 2, clutched her youngest son's hand tightly as she stepped over the cracked threshold of the once-abandoned house. Her older son, Malik, looked around with a mix of excitement and apprehension. The neighborhood was rough, streetlights flickered, graffiti clawed at walls, and people whispered about things best left unsaid. But Tanya needed a fresh start. Affordable housing was scarce, and this investment opportunity was all she could afford. "They say the area's turning around," the landlord had promised. "Good schools nearby, community efforts. You'll be fine." Malik frowned, tightening his grip on his little brother's hand. Something about the house felt heavy, like it was waiting. 2 days after they moved in, the Petersons' youngest boy vanished. "The police came," the neighborhood whispered, but no one looked too hard. "Probably ran off," the officer said, flipping through his notes lazily. "No signs of a struggle," the social worker told Tanya softly, but with a distant look that stung worse than any words. Keisha was there again, standing outside the house. "They say he ran," she whispered to herself, eyes fixed on the locked front door. "But he didn't run, not really. This house doesn't let children go." She pulled a bundle of old newspaper clippings from her backpack, yellowed edges brittle under her fingers. 5 children, 8 years, 1 neighborhood, 1 house. The stories all blurred together like smoke in the winter air. At the next open house, Caldwell smirked as he set up his phone again. "Watch this," he said, showing the clip of Keisha to a young couple. The woman recoiled. "Is she dangerous?" "No, just a scared kid. And probably a liar," Caldwell said with a shrug. "We've had plenty of families move out. Kids get lost all the time in places like this." The man nodded, but something about Keisha's voice lingered in the back of his mind. Keisha wasn't a liar. She was a witness. She was the only one brave enough to say what everyone else feared. That night, the streets whispered with the usual rumors. Children disappearing, parents' silent tears, police reports filed away like old trash. Keisha sat on her stoop, legs swinging, the flickering street lamp casting long shadows over her face. "They think I'm just a scared little girl," she muttered. "But I know the truth. The house is a trap. It feeds on those who are forgotten." Her eyes hardened. "They think because I'm black, because I'm a kid, because I don't have a voice, I won't be heard." But she would be heard. 2 weeks after the Petersons moved in, the neighborhood was whispering again. Tanya's youngest son, little Jamal, was gone. No sign, no trace, but the city shrugged. The police report read, "Possible runaway. No foul play suspected. Social services filed the case under closed with no follow-up." Inside the battered kitchen of the brownstone, Tanya stared at the empty chair where Jamal used to sit. Her voice trembled as she spoke to Malik, trying to hold it together. "Your brother wouldn't just run away, Malik. You know that." Malik's eyes were dark pools, a mix of fear and anger swirling in their depths. He nodded, but said nothing. The boy had seen too much. Outside, the neighborhood was changing, but not for the better. Keisha's world was shifting too. She carried the bundle of newspaper clippings everywhere now, their brittle pages worn from constant reading and rereading. 5 children missing in 8 years. The same pattern. Poor families, black children, disappearing without explanation. No one connected the dots, not the police, not the media, not the city officials. They didn't care. She spent afternoons hanging around the house, her eyes sharp, scanning for anything out of place. Neighbors called her the little witch or crazy kid, but she ignored them. Keisha had learned to wear silence like armor. The old house was more than wood and bricks. It was a cage, a trap, a black hole swallowing the forgotten. One afternoon, Keisha's only ally appeared, a young woman named Marissa. Marissa was an intern at the local newspaper. She had sharp eyes and sharper instincts. When Marissa saw Keisha's clutch of clippings, she frowned. "This isn't just some spooky story, is it?" Marissa whispered as they sat on the cracked steps of the house. "No," Keisha said simply. "It's a warning." Marissa spent days digging through old archives, court records, and police files. She found the same pattern. Every missing child linked back to the brownstone. The reports claimed runaways or neglect, but no investigations, no arrests, no justice. At the office, her editor shrugged. "Not our beat," he said. "Focus on crime stats, sports, anything but the neighborhood kids." Marissa's heart sank, but she was determined. Back at the house, Keisha sat alone, the weight of silence pressing down on her. She remembered what her mother told her once. Sometimes the world doesn't want to hear the truth, but the truth doesn't stop being true. The nights grew darker. Keisha's dreams were haunted by shadows moving behind the cracked walls, whispers calling her name. One night she heard a soft knock at her door. It was Malik Peterson. His voice was barely audible. "Can you help me?" he asked. Malik told her things no kid should know. How the house seemed to breathe, how lights flickered without cause, how whispers filled the halls late at night. He spoke of strange people who came and went, visiting the house in the dead of night. "They don't live here," he said, "but they act like they do." Keisha nodded, understanding. "They're the ones who take the kids." Malik shivered. "I'm scared. What if I'm next?" Keisha's eyes blazed with fierce determination. "Not if I can stop it." The next morning, Marissa called Keisha. "We need proof," she said urgently, "something the police can't ignore." Keisha knew what that meant. She had to get inside the house. They planned it carefully. Marissa would distract the landlord with questions about permits and inspections, while Keisha slipped through a broken side door. Inside, the house was cold and silent. The air smelled of mildew and old secrets. Keisha's heart pounded as she crept through shadowed hallways. She found the basement door, the one the neighbors whispered about but no one dared to open. With a trembling hand, she pushed it open. The basement was a cavern of darkness. Broken furniture, old toys, and faded drawings littered the floor. And then she saw it, a series of crude cages, too small to hold anything but terrified children. A sudden noise made her freeze. Footsteps, voices. Keisha's breath caught. She ducked behind a rusted boiler as 2 men entered. "They're ready for the next shipment," one man said. The other nodded. "The buyers want clean kids, no questions." Keisha's blood ran cold. She raised her phone, hitting record. Marissa's voice came through the earpiece, quiet but steady. "We've got them. Hold tight." The men talked about fake documents, stolen identities, and forced disappearances. Keisha's fingers shook as she recorded every word. She had proof. Suddenly, the men heard a noise, the creak of a floorboard. One of them shone a flashlight in her direction. "Who's there?" Keisha didn't answer. She bolted, heart pounding, racing up the stairs. Outside, Marissa was waiting, eyes wide. "Did you get it?" she asked. Keisha nodded, tears streaming down her face. "We have to get this to the police, now." But when they tried to report it, the system pushed back. The officer on duty dismissed the recording as inaudible, the paperwork inconclusive. Marissa's editor refused to publish without more verified sources. The neighborhood was still ignored. Keisha felt the walls closing in. She realized the fight was bigger than missing children. It was about a system built to ignore black voices, to silence the powerless. One night, after a long day of searching, Keisha sat on her porch. Marissa came to her side. "We're not alone," she said softly. She handed Keisha a letter from a whistleblower inside the agency, someone willing to expose the truth. The letter detailed a network, a ring of agents who used the house as a hub for trafficking children under the guise of international adoption. Fake papers, false claims of abuse, staged emergencies, all designed to erase families. Keisha clutched the letter. Her fingers trembled, but her voice was firm. They think they can hide behind money and power. She looked up at Marissa. They haven't met me yet. Days later, the story broke. Marissa published an exposé with Keisha's evidence. The city was forced to react. Protests erupted, families demanded answers. But the fight was far from over. Caldwell and his cohorts pushed back hard. Threats came in, doors were slammed shut. Keisha and Marissa stood side by side, stronger for the battle ahead. The house was still there, looming. But now the shadows were filled with light. The courtroom was packed, the air thick with tension. Journalists, activists, families of the missing, and city officials filled every seat, standing room only spilling into the halls. Cameras flashed, phones recorded. The old brownstone, the house that had swallowed so many children, sat heavy in everyone's minds. At the center of it all was Keisha, not just a little girl with wild warnings anymore, but the brave voice who refused to be silenced. 2 months earlier, the exposé had shaken the city. Federal investigators had stepped in. Agents in suits swept through the neighborhood, carrying search warrants, flashing badges, and questions. The house was sealed, its walls plastered with "Do Not Enter" notices. Inside, officers uncovered a disturbing truth, a hidden network of traffickers using the house as a processing center. Children were moved under forged papers, sold overseas under fake adoptions. Photos, documents, digital records, all tied to a ring bigger than anyone imagined. But justice wasn't easy. The trial was about more than a house. It was about exposing a system that let this happen. Unchecked police indifference, complicit officials, and a society blind to the voices of the marginalized. On the first day of the trial, Keisha sat quietly in the front row, Marissa beside her holding her hand. The courtroom doors opened, and in walked the man who had sold the house, Richard Caldwell. His confident smile was gone. Now, he was just a man who had underestimated a little girl. Judge Harding, a stern woman known for her no-nonsense approach, called the court to order. "Today," she said, her voice carrying through the room, "we face the truth, not just about this house, but about the lives it affected, and about the voices we refuse to hear." The prosecution began with raw testimony from the families. Tanya Peterson spoke with a cracked voice about her lost son. "Jamal didn't run," she said, tears shining on her cheeks. "He was taken, and for months, no one cared." One by one, mothers, fathers, siblings stepped forward. Their stories painted a picture of heartbreak and neglect. Then it was Keisha's turn. The courtroom hushed. She stood, small but unshakable. Her voice was steady. "They thought because I'm young, because I'm black, I wouldn't be believed." She held up the crumpled newspaper clippings and photos. "But I knew the house was hiding something. I saw the cages. I heard the voices no one else would listen to." The defense attorney tried to discredit her, calling her a child with an overactive imagination. But then Marissa stepped up. She presented the recordings, the documents, the whistleblower's letters, proof of the conspiracy. The judge listened carefully, her gaze sharp. "This is more than a case," she said. "It's a reckoning." Outside the courthouse, protests grew. Community leaders, activists, and strangers gathered, holding signs that read, "Justice for the lost, hear our voices, no more silence." The media spotlight shone bright, forcing officials to respond. The trial uncovered more than just the traffickers. It exposed corruption, city officials who ignored complaints, police officers who dismissed families, bureaucrats who shuffled paperwork while children vanished. Finally, the verdict. Richard Caldwell and his accomplices were found guilty of conspiracy, child trafficking, and obstruction of justice. Sentences ranged from decades in prison to hefty fines. But the victory was bittersweet. Keisha's younger sister, the missing child she had never stopped searching for, was among the lost never found. After the trial, Marissa adopted Keisha. "I want you to know," she told the girl softly, "you changed everything. You saved lives by speaking out." Keisha smiled, her eyes bright. "I just wanted to be heard." In the final scene, Keisha stood again in front of the brownstone, but this time, cameras and reporters surrounded her. The house was boarded up, its windows dark. The street was filled with voices calling for change. Keisha looked straight into the camera, her voice firm. They didn't want to hear me because I was black, because I was small, because I was inconvenient. She paused. But this house is silent now. The crowd erupted in cheers. We are finally speaking. The camera pulled back to show the neighborhood alive with hope. Children playing in freshly cleaned parks, families rebuilding, and a community refusing to forget.